Community design is, I think, probably refers more to a process than a product. It has to do with design professionals working with neighborhood people to use their expertise and their experience as a means of generating thoughts about the future of the community. And it's something that encompasses everything from rehabilitation of housing to urban renewal plans to participation in things like regional transportation initiatives.
Community design is really using the environmental design fields, architecture, planning, urban design, landscape architecture, but melding them with people's own feelings about their environment, respecting people's commitment to the place that they live in, and using their input and really respecting their ideas in implementing design ideas.
This whole project took its own life, and it gave me opportunity to use this vehicle here to tell a story about my community.
And it's not about an architect, a Mighty Mouse architect, coming in and saying this is the answer. It's about the community working together, coming up with new ideas that enhance everybody's quality of life.
You could probably trace some of it back to the early 60s, when the schools of architecture and planning, little by little, some people, some students, some faculty, responded to the devastation that was occurring as a result of highway construction and what was known at the time as urban renewal. And low-income communities across the country were just being disregarded and removed, evaporating overnight.
One of the keystone factors of the community design movement is to incorporate participatory approaches to planning and design. And we feel that is very, very important to emphasize in the recovery and rebuilding efforts in New Orleans and all over the Gulf Coast.
Well, I think historically architecture and design have been pretty much the province of the wealthy and powerful. Architecture grew up as a way of the ruling elite to express their dominance over society with the most powerful and most, the most imposing buildings that kind of told people who was in charge and who wasn't. And I think if we want to live in a society with more social equity and social justice where everybody has kind of respect and dignity, then their physical environment deserves that too. So designing for the community and making sure everybody has an environment that treats them with dignity is really important.
You got a whole bunch of people who have been traumatized, and they're trying to find their way back. You got a whole bunch of federal people who are sitting out here trying to come up with solutions that don't have a clue. And in the middle, there you are. Because you need to be able to talk to those folks who are trying to get back home and understand the programs that are coming down the pipe. I learned a term that I had never heard in my life, charrette. The governor called together and said, we're going to do a charrette. And I'm sitting up here wondering, what is a who? Well, charrette brought together some of the top architects, new urbanists, and they all gathered together in a room like this, and they closed off and they started working, coming up with a plan that I knew was destined to fail. You know why?
People weren't there.
People were not there.
It's very important because community design centers are a way of connecting people who know things about implementation, so architects and planners, with people who traditionally don't have access to those services.
There's a lot of scope for professionals to weigh in a volunteer way to bring communities the expertise that they need to understand the complicated issues that our cities have these days.
If there is a changing landscape of community design, is that maybe after 30 years of all of you working so hard to get it there, that after 30 years maybe we have gotten to that tipping point.
Mm-hmm. And I also think we're at a position where design is not the end-all, do-all, right, but it's simply a part of the process. It's not the end. And I see more and more people not being afraid to say that.
Empowering people. It's exactly what was just said at the last site. Making people feel comfortable with the process of being a client, so to speak. Being able to learn about, educate people about the importance of good design and the qualities of design that respect the context of their community, giving value to the context of what is already there so that can be built upon. So those are really important things that community design can do.
We have to be the liaison. And in a sense, a lot of the people in this movement come from the middle class, or they came from the working class and moved up into the middle class by, via their education. So they're in a critical position in the class structure to help create that linkage between those who have and those who don't. And we have to be shrewd in how we do that.
The professionals need to find the centers of influence. To come into a community that you don't know or doesn't know you, there's particularly in a culture like Louisiana, there's this distrust. Everybody's always coming to help, but there's a long history of people coming to help that in all honesty have their own agenda. They need to build relationships, take a center of influence, someone that can get in the community, someone that's willing to speak for the community, at the same time willing to listen to new ideas and use that center of influence to build the bridge, because that's what it needs. It needs a bridge between the technician and the stakeholder.
My question to anyone who's considered a client is to build a relationship, especially in this type of project. I can't talk about somebody who want to build a $300 million building or something like this, because that's a business world. But when you talk about people, homes, and their lives and things, the interaction of these people, of getting a feel of the person, where you can understand their idea, and how they feel about a certain thing, and that you get the same gratification out of that the individual has as a person and not a client.
This, in a sense, is a front line of all those efforts around the country to preserve the rights and opportunities of probably 30-40% of the population is this fragile in the country. I mean, what it is now, 80 or 85% of the wealth is in the hands of maybe 10%, and the bottom 40% has only 1% of the nation's wealth. It's the worst of the industrialized countries. So this is, you don't want to use military analogies, but it is, in a sense, a kind of battlefront to preserve the rights of that 40% of the country who has been abandoned by our economy.
What is the most important thing about community design?
Go ahead.
Community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because they have the answers.